Μπορείς να ξεκινήσεις.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for coming in this online lecture of ProGender project by Pantheon University. I am Maria Stratigaki. I am a professor at the university in social policy, and I'm very happy to welcome you today to this sixth online lecture of ProGender. ProGender is a project that lasts for 18 months. Now we are at the last 6 months, the third semester of the project. So this is the sixth online lecture. There will be 4 more. For those who are joining for the first time our series of lectures in online lectures in this project, I would like to say something about the project itself. The project is a project called a Digital Hub on Gender and the COVID-19. And it is a project funded by the EEA grants. The project studies how the COVID-19 and the pandemic has changed gender relations in 5 topics, in 5 areas. The first one is care and labor. The second is on violence, like our today lecture. The third is gender in science. The fourth is gender and communities. And the last one is women in governance. So in these 5 topics areas, thematic areas, our project studies and tries to discuss the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on gender and on gender relations. So we collaborate very closely with 2 organizations. The first is RIK, the Institute for Gender Equality and Difference at the University of Iceland. And the second organization is in Norway, the Center for Gender Research at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. It is an international project. That's why we have good partners to go together in this project. So today, the online lecture will be introduced by Elin from RIK, from Iceland. And Elin is going to introduce the topic and the speaker. Looking forward for a very interesting lecture. Please stay with us and be informed about our future events. For your information, the next event, and I will close with it, the next event is on the 27th of March. It is a discussion panel, not a lecture, a discussion panel in Greek for the first time in this project. We are going to have an event in Greek, and it will be on the same topic of today's lecture, that means on the services for survivors in COVID times. So we are going to discuss in Greece how the services for accepting and supporting survivors of violence are developed and what they do now. So thank you for your presence today. I give the floor to Elin, who is going to introduce the lecture and also coordinate the discussion after the lecture. Thank you very much, Elin.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So on behalf of the Center for Gender Studies of Pantheon University and RIK Institute for Gender Equality and Difference at the University of Iceland, I want to welcome you to this guest lecture in the ProGender project. And as Maria said, my name is Elin Björk Jónsdóttir, and I am a project manager at RIK, and I will be moderating the session today. Now, today's lecturer is Steinunn Guðjónsdóttir, spokesperson of Stígamót, Center for Survivors of Sexual Violence. Steinunn's talk is titled Sexual Violence, Prevention Work and Services for Survivors in COVID Times. And before I give the floor to Steinunn, I want to mention that we will have time for discussion after the lecture with questions from the audience. So Steinunn, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to start here by sharing some slides so that you can follow me. Here we go. All right. I'm very happy to be with you here today. My name is Steinunn, and I work at Stígamót in Iceland, which is a grassroots organization which is combating sexual violence over here. And what I would like to talk about today is I basically have two topics that I wanted to cover. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Stígamót, our organization, and what kind of work we are doing with survivors and what we learn about sexual violence through this work. And then I'll reflect on this work through the COVID-19 glasses and look at what kind of effects the pandemic has had on our services for survivors. And then the second part, I would like to speak to you about our prevention campaign for young people, which is called Crazy Love, and also a little bit about what kind of impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the Crazy Love campaign, and how we have tried to create a campaign that works during a pandemic, and how that and if that was successful. So I will start a little bit just about Stígamót and sexual violence, and then in the second part we will talk about prevention. I'll give you some glimpses from this campaign, hopefully for inspiration if you're interested in this kind of work, and also to reflect a little bit on COVID. But in general, we are just hopefully at the end of COVID, so we still don't have the distance from what has been going on to really understand what kind of impacts in general it has had. Maybe we'll see it a little bit better when time passes. But at least what I have here today are just some thoughts and just and experiences from me and my co-workers. So first of all, we are a counseling and education center on sexual violence, and we have two main objectives. And the first one is to offer free services for survivors of sexual violence. And we do this mainly through counseling sessions and self-help groups. So we meet people here for counseling sessions. You need to be 18 to come to Stígamót, so you're 18 or older. And we meet with women, men, and people of all genders here. And you come just on your own. You just decide yourself. You don't need a reference or anything to come to Stígamót. And what we offer is help to self-help. And this is really grassroots-oriented work. And then the second part of our work, which is also very important, is our political and social work, meaning that what we learn from survivors, from sitting with them in counseling sessions all day, is very important, and we need to, and we feel obligated to share what we learn from them with the society as a whole. We feel that they are experiencing grave injustice, and they are often experiencing same sets of complications and consequences after the violence. And so what we gather here is very important information about the lives of survivors of sexual violence and how sexual violence is perpetrated and by whom, etc. So that's what we do through our political work. We raise awareness on sexual violence, and we do everything we can to prevent violence from happening. We advocate for better systems to address sexual violence, whether it's the justice system, the education system, or the health system. And we participate in all kinds of activism, both locally as well as with organizations across the Nordic countries, Europe, or globally. We were established in 1990 on the International Women's Day. So we just turned 32 last week. And we are the offspring of the women's movement, from offspring of the notion and the idea of making the personal political. How sexual violence was treated before was that it was a personal problem of the woman, or a personal problem of the family, something that shouldn't be talked about, something that should just be And Stígamót was also sort of like a it was how can I explain it? The women that started Stígamót felt that psychiatrists and psychologists, they were failing women. They were pathologizing them instead of seeing violence as a social problem, as a gendered problem, as a problem that affects women and girls disproportionately, and treating it as such. So the idea of Stígamót is to believing women, believing survivors of all genders, solidarity, and we started as a peer center. So the women that worked here were other women that had experienced sexual violence, and they were counseling women with the same experience. And then time passes and the society changes, and today we have much more education. All the counselors here are either psychologists or social workers or art therapists or other kinds of counselors or gender specialists. And that's because we have progressed as a society. We understand today much better how violence is not a family problem, but a social problem. And so we were redefining the concept of the expert. The experts were the women themselves or the survivors themselves, instead of some psychiatrist who told them how they should feel in the aftermath of the violence. And here you can just see an overview of the kinds of violence that we are working with on daily basis. Mostly what we are working with is rape and incest, or not, well, incest in the meaning sexual abuse of children perpetrated by someone who the child trusts. These are the biggest ones, and then but we also work with all other forms of sexual violence, such as sexual harassment, online sexual abuse or digital abuse, human trafficking, prostitution, pornography, and all other forms of violence in the porn industry. Violence in intimate relationships. We have another organization in Iceland that focuses much more on domestic violence and intimate partnership violence. But of course, we work with that here too, because rape is generally a part of intimate partner violence. Yeah. And here we see why people come to Stígamót. You can come because of many different things, but you can basically see the biggest ones on the left. Most people are coming to Stígamót because of rape. And then there's a big part of the people that come here are coming because of incest. And then, of course, many of them have also experienced sexual harassment, but most of them are coming because of the other two. And then you can see how we are also working with pornography, prostitution, etc. We ask, so at Stígamót, we only see survivors and their loved ones, but we don't see the perpetrators. However, we ask the survivors a lot of questions about the perpetrators to collect data so that we can learn a little bit more, because we need to know stuff about perpetrators. Otherwise, we can't prevent violence. If we don't know who is committing the violence, we can't prevent it. So here are just a few things that we know about perpetrators from the people that come to Stígamót. 75% are known to the survivor, and then known as this is a friend or a family member or a teacher, trainer, etc. In the rape cases, the majority of the perpetrators are friends and acquaintances, and in the incest cases, the 41% are fathers and brothers, or stepfathers and stepbrothers. So and the rest is generally someone else somehow related to the family. And just a note on the intimate partner violence, 24% of the rape cases that we receive here in Stígamót are perpetrated by a spouse. So there we see that this is often related to boyfriends or husbands, etc. And the majority of the rape cases are committed by young men. And then I mean younger than 30 years and younger. But when we look at the survivors, so as I said before, people need to be 18 to come to Stígamót. If you're younger than 18, it's the Child Protection Services that provide you with assistance. But here in this picture, we can see how old our people were when they were first sexually abused, and how old they were when they came to Stígamót. And as you can see, 70% of them were younger than 18 when they first experienced sexual violence. So sexual violence disproportionately affects young people, teenagers and children. And then you can see the yellow lines show how old people were when they came to Stígamót. I think it's good that the 18 to 29-year-old is a long line. It's a big 50% of the people are coming when they're young people. However, if you are sexually abused when you're 10 or 11, and then you come here when you're 20 or 21 or something, you've already waited for 10 years. And normally the people that come to us, they have not spoken to other professionals about the violence before. So we are the first place where they seek help. So the children that go into the Child Protection Services, they normally don't come to us when they're older. These are the people that never got any help when they were children. And here you can see pictures from a campaign that we created a few years ago. And as you can see, they are holding numbers there. And generally, I would ask you now, what do you think the numbers stand for? I don't know if that's convenient in an online lecture, so I will just tell you. The numbers that they are holding there are the number of years that passed from when they were first sexually abused and then until they sought help at Stígamót. So some of them waited for 3 years, others waited for 42 years. And so this goes to show that people generally live very long alone in silence after experiencing sexual violence. And they wait a long time and they feel a lot of shame, and they generally often filled with guilt after the violence. But it also goes to show that it's never too late to seek assistance. And what we experienced after running this campaign was that there was a huge influx of people coming to Stígamót to seek help, because they saw those strong survivors telling them that there is a way to feel better after being subjected to violence. And here you can see how, so these are the consequence list. This is how our people are reporting how they feel after being subjected to violence. And there are always those 5 at the top: shame, anxiety, sadness, low self-esteem, and guilt. And I would like to highlight the shame and the guilt, because that should never be the survivor's shame, or it's never their guilt. It's always the perpetrators who is responsible and should feel the shame and the guilt. However, it's the survivor who is often bearing this shame and guilt. And then when we go down the list, we also see other consequences, all kinds of problems with social relations with spouse, family, friends, co-workers, and then other very grave consequences such as suicidal thoughts, self-injury, eating disorders, etc. So we can see that the consequences are affecting often the everything in the lives of the survivors. And that's why it's important for them to be able to seek help, to work on the consequences. And the goal of coming to a place such as Stígamót is basically to feel better, to see yourself as a survivor, not as a victim, to put the blame and the shame and the guilt where it belongs, with the perpetrator, to be able to better handle feelings and unwelcome memories, for instance, in the form of flashbacks and nightmares. And of course, what I'm describing here is PTSD. And many of the people that come here are experiencing PTSD. The goal is to have decreased fear, decreased depression, anxiety, and isolation, but increased self-esteem and self-compassion. And just to have a better and more fulfilling relationship with friends, family, spouses, children, co-workers, etc. And so this is what we're working on daily basis with our people here. Now, in the context of COVID, there has been a lot of discussion about how violence increases in a pandemic, and I think that's correct. And we know that domestic violence has increased during the pandemic, and here in Iceland, during the first wave of COVID infections, there were 2 murders of women in Iceland. I have to put it into context. We are a nation of 380,000 people, so and murders are quite rare in Iceland. So that having 2 gender-based violence acts this grave in a short amount of time just shows how these isolation affects the perpetration of violence. And here at Stígamót, we were especially worried about children in violent homes. And again, I'm showing you the pictures of people who waited for 18 or 20 or 40 years to come to Stígamót after being sexually abused as children. And we know that during social distancing and isolation, the children are in an especially vulnerable situation. We haven't really seen increase in sexual violence during the pandemic. Actually, we've seen decrease in sexual violence. At least that's what the numbers from the police are showing. The numbers from the Icelandic police are saying that there was decrease in rape and other sexual violence, and they connected specifically to the nightlife or the nightclubs being closed, and that people were not partying and just seeing each other as much as normally. So, and that might very well be true, that kind of sexual violence that is related somehow to parties or nightlife, etc., may have decreased. But I am pretty sure that violence in the home increased. However, we will hear from those children in maybe 10 years, and then we will know. And then they are coming to seek help and will explain to us what the COVID pandemic did to their family life. Regarding the services, it was difficult to maintain services during social distancing. Of course, we were very grateful, like others, that we were able to use technology, and we changed everything into online counseling sessions, and we've been going on and off through online counseling sessions based on the waves of infections in the last 2 years, and we just came back from online sessions last week. So we've been doing online sessions since Christmas. So yeah, but there are, so basically the pro of online sessions is that it's there, it's available. We are still there for our people. They are able to book an online session, meet with their counselor and talk. However, there was a lot of things that were to consider, for instance, the safety of the survivor and the privacy of the survivor speaking in their home, especially during when the social distancing, when most people were staying at home, and when they had their school-aged children at home, etc. So and then a lot of what we do in counseling sessions is based on connection and trust. And it is more difficult to build up trust over a computer screen. When you can only see me from here and up, you cannot see the rest of my body language, and you cannot see the rest of the surroundings around me and what kind of atmosphere I'm trying to create in the counseling session. And so there were a lot of people that put off going into counseling. They had booked an appointment, and then when they heard that it was an online counseling, they decided, no, I will wait. And so a lot of people missed out on counseling, especially during 2020. And also, just regarding the atmosphere, sometimes when people are coming to online counseling sessions, they are in their pajamas and they're sitting in their bed. And it's different. It feels like you're in bed with people trying to create the atmosphere for opening up about difficult experiences. And so I think all of the counselors at Stígamót would definitely choose their counseling room over online sessions. We also did online group sessions, and which were they were successful. They were, but it was also, there were lots of thought about privacy. How can you make sure that no one in the group, that someone at home is listening to the group, or that someone will come into the room where someone is attending a group session. We saw that survivors lost many of their coping mechanisms during the pandemic, which added an extra emotional burden on top of the pandemic. So they were experiencing all the chaos and the anxiety and everything that came with, especially when it was first happening. But then they were also experiencing their trauma consequences. And they lost on their coping mechanisms. For some, it can be just to meet up with a friend or go to a choir practice or just show up to school every day and just to have a routine in their life. And that's how they deal with the trauma that they have experienced. And then all of that was taken away. And so that was mainly what the counseling sessions were about during this time. Our staff was eager to get back to in-person sessions, just highlighting how having a presence with people was important, back to this building connection and trust. And yeah, for us, that may more of an internal matter, but we work in a flat structure in Iceland. Now in Stígamót, basically, we don't have a CEO, we are all equal. And then we divided the staff into smaller groups for infection control. And I will just tell you that doesn't work very well with a flat organizational chart. Okay. Yeah, it's 4:30, and now I'm going into the second part of the lecture. I hope that we are doing well on time. Yeah, Elín asked me to speak about our prevention campaign called Crazy Love. And I'm always happy to speak about that because I love prevention work, and I think it just comes with, working with sexual violence every day. You get the urge to try and do everything you can to prevent it. Because how much easier would our lives be if we could prevent the violence from ever happening? There is no easy fix to that, but at least we are doing what we can here. And so what we've been doing recently is the Crazy Love campaign, and it's a prevention program for teenagers, which is oh, that's what happened. Yeah, it's a prevention program for teenagers aged 13 to 19. And it is the reason why we decided to go into working on this topic is basically what I told you before, that 70% of those that seek help at Stígamót were sexually abused before the age of 18. And also, like I said before, the perpetrators are young. So we need to speak to them. while they're young. They need to get this information while they're young so that they can know if they've been abused, and so that they can change their behavior if they recognize themselves using unhealthy communications or even abuse. And the background, basically, there was no dating violence campaign in Iceland, and they just felt the need to prevent sexual violence. And the objectives are basically that the first objective is that teenagers can distinguish between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationships. And the second objective is that teenagers know the concepts boundaries and consent. And I feel that there's been a lot of work done on consent in Iceland. We had different campaigns on consent, but I feel like boundaries was a concept that wasn't really much talked about when we first started out. And I feel like we've been sort of successful in putting this concept on the agenda. And now I feel like many young people are speaking much more about boundaries, how they set boundaries, how they respect boundaries, etc. And then, these were the objectives for the first 2 years, but then we realized we need the third objective, which is that the third objective is that teenagers can distinguish between sex and sexual violence and understand how porn and pornography blurs the lines between those two. The name for the campaign, it's called Sjúk Ást in Icelandic, which can sort of be translated, well, the literal translation is sick love, but I think it translates better into crazy love. So, and it basically works with the ambiguity between are you crazy in love or are you crazy in love? So you can be crazy in love and it can be so much fun, or you can be crazy in love and then you've gone over a line and it's not healthy anymore. So it's a word play. And it's also, I think it also sort of describes the extremes that we see in violent relationships. Many people that have experienced violence in intimate relationships describe them as their best relationships and their worst relationships, because the cycle of violence works like that it's the craziest love ever, it's so much fun, and then it gets really, really dark in between. So I think it captures very well violent relationships. So we started out by putting up a website and a social media campaign, create videos, and we did visits to high school, advertisement like the one you can see here on the bus stop, which during the day it said, "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." And then when the night comes and the darkness, it says, "I'll kill myself if you leave me." And this is based on very thing that we hear very regularly from survivors of intimate partner violence. This constant threat of the abuser threatening to kill himself if the survivor or the victim tries to leave. And here we can just see a little bit more of the campaign material from the first year. It says there, "I'm crazy about you. Come on, I'll be really quick," focusing on sexual violence and that. And the other one says, "You always look out for me and you're suffocating me." So we're just working with this, the best thing in a relationship and the worst thing in a relationship. Framing. Who are we talking to in a prevention campaign? Well, basically, we should be talking to the perpetrators. And basically, if we are to prevent violence, we should only be talking to the perpetrators. However, I don't think it's feasible. We need to speak to the potential survivors as well. We can't remove them from a campaign, especially because it's it's geared toward children, this campaign. It's for 13 to 19-year-olds. So most of them are still legally children. So we are talking to potential perpetrators, potential survivors, and potential bystanders. Maybe some of them are already perpetrators and already survivors, we don't know. So we try to set up the message so that we are speaking to all of these groups. Just a side note, many dating violence campaigns only speak to survivors because they're geared towards helping people out of abusive relationships. I think the strong focus here on prevention makes sure that we also speak to perpetrators. And I think we should more often speak to perpetrators. We are always talking to survivors about the violence that happens to them. We also need to be aware of the diversity of young people and their experiences. We need to make sure that we're including all of the forms of their relationships, LGBTQ. We need to make sure that we are including all genders, girls and boys and trans girls and trans boys and you know, the gender fluidity and everything, non-binary children, etc. And we need to make sure that we are also including different marginalized groups, disabled teenagers or teenagers from with immigrant status or from immigrant families, etc. And the violence that we are working with in this campaign is, I mean, we work with sexual violence here at Stígamót, but we felt the dire need to speak about emotional violence with young people, that they understand how abusers use language and words and their feelings to sort of trick them or so that they just get stuck in their web. So we speak a lot about emotional violence. And then, of course, we need to include the digital violence, which is a specific threat towards teenagers. And the main focus in the campaign has been this here. It's called the relationship spectrum, and we borrowed it from loveisrespect.org, which is an American organization. I really recommend it, loveisrespect.org. And here the relationship spectrum shows you how relationships are can exist on a spectrum. Everything from healthy relationships, which are based on equality and respect, and there's trust and empathy and honesty and good communication. And then when you go over to unhealthy relationships, these are relationships where one person in the relationship is always trying to seize control over the other one. And there you can see like this a lot of jealousy, suspicion, questions about who were you with, where are you, is he there, etc. There's breaks in communication, and there's power struggles, etc. And then when we're going all the way over to abusive relationships, that's basically when one person has taken control of the relationship and uses accusations, isolation, all kinds of pressure and control and humiliation. And what I find very helpful with this diagram is that when we see their abusive relationships, it doesn't say kicking or slapping or raping or stuff like that. It can easily be a full-on abusive relationship, even though there is no physical violence there, or even sexual violence. It's always, you can just see how this is grave in and of itself. And now I wanted to show you one short video that was created for the first campaign back in 2018.
Þú svarar mér ekki strax.
Here.
Þegar ég hitti þið fyrst, og ég kíkti í magann og ég gat ekki hægt að hugsa um þig. Ég svo sjúk í þig að mér langar að vera endalaust með þér. Mér langar ekki að sleppa þig eina sekúndu. Þegar þú sýnir mig og svarar mér ekki strax, þá verð ég sjúklega áhyggjufull. Það ógeðslega illa gert. Hvernig heldurðu að mér líði þegar ég veit ekkert hvar þú ert eða með hverjum? Ég vil bara vita að sé í lagi með þig. Þú treystir þér alveg. Treystir bara ekki öllum í kringum þig. Réttu mér símann. Finnst þér það óþægilegt að þú hefur ekkert að fela? Varstu að snappa Dísu? Ég held þú snappir Dísu oftar en mig. Mér finnst bara svo gaman að fylgjast með því hvað það er að gera. Kannski elskar mig bara ekki jafn mikið og ég elska þig. Ég bara svo sjúklega ástfangin af þér. Og svarar...
Sorry, I need to share my screen again.
Og svarar mér ekki strax.
Is everyone still there? Yeah, okay, yeah, I can see you not now. Okay, yeah, so this is one of the videos. There were more videos created with different scenes of violence, different perpetrators, different survivors, etc. But we've used this video to speak, and then we let the teenagers in the classroom. So we asked them, now that you've seen the video, what words here on the relationship spectrum would you use to describe what she was saying in the video? And it's really amazing to watch the teenagers work this out, because they see it right away that she is crazy jealous, and that she has all kinds of suspicions. She's suspicious, and she's using accusations. Just something like, I think you sent more snaps to some other girl, or I think that I love you more than you love me. So there is possessiveness there. There is, she's trying to isolate by saying stuff like, I trust you, I just don't trust anyone around you. So, you know, and they are able to identify all of those things. And when we ask them, where would you put this on the spectrum? Normally the answer is, we would put it somewhere there between unhealthy and abusive. And I think that's correct. We just get this one snapshot into the relationship, so it's somewhere there, and they are able to identify this. And I feel like it's nice to use a video with all kinds of phrases that they've heard before. It's not like someone is there saying like something super mean or like super controlling. It's all those little things that they can identify. Okay. And then the year after, we were scaling up the campaign and make it more sustainable, and we do it through we train the trainers. So we do it, and we are in a cooperation with the youth centers in Iceland, which is sort of like an after-school program. It's centers that are open in the evening for teenagers. They all go to this one big dance once a year, and they made it compulsory for everyone to receive the ticket to the dance. You have to come, you have to show up for a Crazy Love education seminar in your youth center. And we train the staff, and they do the education with the kids. And so it's an education about boundaries and consent and sexual harassment. And I really love that it's not me that is going to the youth centers and speaking to the kids and then leaving, but it's the staff at the center that they are doing this lecture and sort of opening up the conversation about these kind of topics. And so the kids can always come back to these staff members to speak about this in more depth if they want to. And like I told you before, we had to add one objective to the campaign. which we did in 2020. And that was because at Stígamót, we are seeing more and more young survivors that are speaking about the violence that they experienced. And it's just like they're describing a clip from Pornhub. They're just describing something that you would see in mainstream porn. And so we feel like there's a lot of the porn is really influencing how young people are experiencing sex, and there is something off there. And we know that the average exposure to porn from an Icelandic research is that they are 11 years old when they're seeing porn for the first time. And when the boys are in high school and college, more than half of them are watching porn once a week or more often. And the girls, they're not using porn the same way, but they have seen it. And we feel like, so if teenagers are watching porn once a week, they should be receiving sex and relationship education once a week as well. If we really wanted to counteract the very scary messages that they're getting from porn about how they should perform in their sex lives, then we need to do better. And so basically what we did in this campaign was just to create materials about with positive information about sex, and just to counteract the porn effects somehow. And we did that by focusing on consent, boundaries, and communication. And we created something like the relationship spectrum. We can't call it a sex spectrum because what's in the purple box is not sex, but sexual violence. And we are trying to establish the difference between the two. And here you can just see how you can say that there is sex based on consent and respect. There is it's mutual, there's communication, there are boundaries, there's intimacy. That we didn't put love in the box. It's not necessary. It can still be healthy and very good, even though it's not within a relationship or there's not love in there. But it needs to be mutual and it needs to give pleasure, etc. And then in the pink box, we decided that somewhere, unhealthy. It's sex that someone is not comfortable with, based on their own, because they're not themselves setting boundaries, or they are insecure, or they're somehow feeling obligated to live up to the ideals of pornography, etc. And then when we come to the purple box, then someone is putting this pressure on them or is forcing them to do some other things. There we see lack of consent. There's control. There are demands about sex, or there's nagging for a yes, etc. And I wanted to show you one video that was created for this campaign.
Ég gerði einhvern veginn ráð fyrir því að gaurar fíluðu bara allt.
Þannig ég var bara eitthvað, flengdu mig, en vissi samt aldrei hvort hann fílaði það líka.
Já, ég held að sé ekki rétt að allir strákar fíli allt. En ég finnst eins og þeir tala mjög lítið hvað þeir fíla. Þannig það ekkert að því að bara spurja, ekki neitt að því, sko. Það bara cute, mér finnst það sætt.
Ég hélt að til þess að vera góð kærasta þyrfti ég að vera best í kynlífi. Ég var að æfa alls konar stellingar sem hann myndi fíla og var alltaf til og hugsaði endalaust hvernig ég liti sem best út í kynlífinu. Ég var ekkert að pæla mikið hvað ég vildi.
Svo spurði hann mig að því hvort að ég væri að fá eitthvað út úr þessu.
Það var bara pínu wake-up call. Og ég þetta tengi ég mjög mikið við. Þetta eitthvað sem við höfum alla lent í, held ég.
Maður heyrir alltaf, samskipti eru svo mikilvæg í kynlífi.
En mér finnst það bara sjúklega erfitt. Hvernig á maður að gera þetta? Hér þinglýstur samningur fyrir því að þú vilt sleikja með punginn.
Auðvitað það ekki þannig, en maður þarf samt að vita hvað henni manneskjunni finnst næst og hvað ekki. You speak the truth. En þú þarft ekki að vera svona formlegur, bara spurðu. Þetta svo, sko kynlíf og samskipti kynjanna, þetta lykillinn í hversu intimate þetta og það ekki eins intimate og á að vera ef þú þorir ekki að spurja og segja hvað þér finnst, skilurðu, þannig og bara, þetta var fallegt.
Ég var að sofa hjá í fyrsta skipti og ég fann að ég var alveg að fá það, þannig ég dreif mig í því að kippa honum út og fleygði mér á hnén við hliðina á höfðinu á henni og brundaði framan í hana.
Viðbrögðin hennar voru ekki alveg eins og ég hafði séð fyrir mér. Hún fór að hágráta. Ég hefði átt að spyrja hana.
Já. Þú átt að spyrja hana maður.
Bara því að ég sagði klámi, þá skilur það bara megar ekki alveg sens. Þannig að kannski bara næst að spyrja.
Alltaf þegar ég hugsaði að tala saman í kynlífi var ég mjög óöruggt og fannst það alltaf mjög vandræðalegt.
Af hverju finnst maður eðlilegt að googla bara hvað maður á að gera í kynlífi? Frekar heldur en að spyrja hina að það.
En loksins þegar við þorðum að spjalla saman var kynlífið bara svo miklu betra.
Þú getur ekki farið á Subway og beðið gæðinu að gera bara eitthvað og síðan verður við að pyrra út í hand þegar þú fílar ekki samúð við það.
Kynlíf snýst náttúrulega aðalega bara að tala saman og segja hvað manni finnst gott. Og ég persónulega fór að stunda mikið betra kynlíf eftir að ég fór að segja í alvörunni það sem ég vildi í staðinn fyrir að segja það sem ég hélt að hinn vildi heyra.
Ég veit ekki, það mikilvægt að nota orðin sín. Þú verði í að það sagði amma mín alltaf um mig.
Yeah, I hope you were able to catch everything that they were saying. They were speaking kind of fast, so I hope you were able to catch the subtitles. But basically, they were reading out stories that we have heard, and then they were reacting to those stories. And we decided to create, I mean, it's supposed to counteract pornography. So they're very, very used to seeing naked bodies doing all kinds of stuff to each other, because they watch it very regularly. And so then thus the drawings there that are basically describing what is happening. This campaign was ready on, I think, the 9th of March in 2020. And the day after, everything closed, everything. And so the posters didn't go up in schools. And oops, sorry. Yeah, the posters didn't go up in schools. The education seminars were not held because the youth centers were closed. So the schools were closed, the youth centers were closed, so nothing happened in real life. So we're like, okay, we'll just go full on online campaign. We'll just create, we'll just make it worth all the work that we put into this. And what happened? It was censored all over, all social media platforms. So we were not able to create sponsored campaign on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And we were even put on a blacklist by Facebook and Instagram, and they wanted us to go to a course on how to behave on the internet, which is very, I mean, because this is a campaign that's supposed to counteract pornography, and then we were sort of being, they were, accusing us of being the ones that are distributing porn. So yeah, it was pretty bad. But we did create censored videos, which you can see here in the background. We just put a black box over all the drawings. Fortunately, the Facebook algorithm doesn't understand Icelandic. So the kids were able to speak about all this stuff without being censored. So we were able to put up a sponsored campaign with this. But of course, it's weird to do it that way. But yeah, basically the whole campaign was somehow didn't work out. which was a shame. So we thought for the next campaign, which was in 2021, we had to do it 3 or 4 times over, the whole concept for the campaign in 2021, because we were going to shoot some pictures and photos and videos for the campaign, and then everything closed, and we were not allowed to put 10 people together in a room, which was what we needed to be able to do the material. So it's like, you know, just basic COVID problems. But we decided to make sure that it was a little bit more online applicable. So no sexually explicit images, whether drawn or not. And so this campaign was called Is This Love? And was based on a very popular song in Iceland, which is called Is This Love in Icelandic. And we created an online test. And the test pretty much looks like this here. And there's a question, or no, it's a statement, and then about relationships, such as my partner encourages me to work on my hobbies, and then you're supposed to say, is this healthy, unhealthy, or violent? And so this was so they got 12 statements, and they choose it's healthy, unhealthy, and violent, and then they learn a little bit more. So they're applying what they learn from the campaign by doing the test. And what was very we were happy about that 20,000 people took the test, the online test, during the campaign period, and most of them came through sponsored social media advertisement, which told us that most of them were between the age 13 and 19. And I have to say that for me, with a nation of 380,000, when we got 20,000 to take the test, that's a considerable proportion of the nation. So we were quite happy with this. And so we were able to at least do something for them. And we had considerable engagement in the campaign from influencers. So we put the budget that we would otherwise have used in posters and stuff to put up in schools, and we just invested it in creating online material and talking to influencers and stuff like that. So we were able to at least have something there for the teenagers, but the schools and the youth centers were minimally involved. They were also closed for a big part of this period. So there was missing this real life connection. And I feel like it's very important in a campaign for young people that it's not just something on the internet. It's also something that happens in their near environment. Yeah, so this is all that I wanted to say. We have social media for both the Crazy Love campaign on Instagram and for our organization Stígamót on Facebook, and you can look at our websites and read it with Google Translate and hopefully get some more understanding of our work if you're interested. So I will now stop the screen sharing, and I'm of course open to all discussion, questions, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steinunn. We now have some time for discussion. And first, I just want to thank you also for highlighting the fact that we are still in the pandemic situation. When we started the ProGender project, we were going to focus on the gendered aspects of COVID and its aftermath. And we are not yet in the aftermath, but it's probably going to be very interesting to see what information comes out when we get a little bit of distance. There was also one question, yeah, you answered the question from the chat already. The statistics are about the people seeking assistance from Stígamót. So I just want to open the floor if members of the audience want to raise their hand or write the question in the chat box. I'm sure Steinunn will be happy to answer your questions about all the different works that is being done at Stígamót. So while we wait for questions from the audience, do you want to talk a little bit about the appearance of the different campaigns? Because I think it's so striking how they develop over the years.
Yeah, well, for the Crazy Love campaigns, we've been working with an advertisement agency, and generally before, when we worked with an advertisement agency, it hasn't gone very well because they just don't understand feminism and gender equality and stuff like that. So it's always been a difficult sort of relationship. But for this campaign, I think it really, really added, because if they wouldn't have come into the campaign, it would be called Respect Week, which is definitely not as good of a name as Crazy Love, and it would have, looked very, very differently. And it's been very important in this campaign to sort of relate to teenagers, and to make sure that we don't look like grown-ups. We're trying to be cool for the teenagers. And I think that the advertisement agency has actually really helped us in that to make it actually look cool and not like a fake cool.
Yeah, drastically different looks also for different approaches.
Yeah. We started out with a very dark look when we were working on the Crazy Love versus the Crazy Love kind of ambiguities. But then when we went over to talking about porn and sex, we couldn't continue with this black and white kind of theme. It would have been so depressing, and because when talking about sex, it's such a touchy topic, like we realized with the social media platforms, that we really felt like it really needed to be in a colorful package and to be super positive. We are not there to ruin your sex lives. We are there to make sure that it's actually enjoyable and that you're not going to be being, committed to sexual violence. So so that's basically, and then we've been working with different colors since then.
Okay, Nelly, do you have a question for Steinunn?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to share with you the Greek experience about these issues. Basically, I find really interesting the statistics that you have collected regarding children underaged, gender-based violence and against underage people. And it's an issue that has just started to be discussed here in Greece, because we have a case of a very famous person, actually, who was the director of the National Theatre of Greece. And there are several accusations of him having committed violence against underaged victims, and it has been one of the issues that I think it's really difficult for public opinion to deal with. What you've described, the fact that people decide or end up discussing those issues when they are adults, and it has been used by the lawyers of this person as an argument against the accusations, so there are people who would say, well, you waited so long, why didn't you say it earlier? And it has been used both in public discourse and in court as an argument that supposedly proves that this person is unreliable because it took them so long to talk about the crime and the violence. And I was wondering if you have any suggestions of how we can address this kind of discourse on an everyday level. If we find this in amongst the people we know, or in our classes, or in on Facebook or whatever. It would be very helpful if you could give us some advice on how we deal with these kinds of attitudes, which are of course horrible, and at least in Greece they can still be used in court against victims.
Yeah. And these attitudes have also thrived here in Iceland, and we've had so much public discourse around these topics last year, because we had sort of like a second wave of Me Too last year, and this time a lot of it was exactly about 16 and 17-year-olds coming forward as adult women today and talking about famous singers, sports, sports heroes, and other prominent men in society. I would basically, the arguments against this is, if you know anything about trauma, it's basically all research shows that it takes people a long time to talk about the trauma that they have experienced. So basically what we need to do as activists and as advocates and as academics is to inform the public about this research. And that's basically, and because we know this, it's already been scientifically proved that it takes a long time to be able to seek help after a trauma, especially when you're a child, because children often, they know basically that they will not be believed when they tell, and they are worried that they themselves are somehow guilty in the process. It's not until they are able to see, as adults, that they were being coerced or groomed, or somehow being abused by the older person, generally in these cases. So yeah, so basically we need to be very focused on informing the public about all this research that is already there. And I think that the reason why we at Stígamót gather so extensive statistics about the people that seek help here is basically to debunk wrong statements in public discourse. So we have been able to show that no, they are not all drunk when they are raped, or no, it's not the unknown monster who is attacking women, just some other. There are so many myths about sexual violence and gender-based violence in general. So it's very important for us to collect this data to be able to say, well, the data doesn't really support this kind of talk. Yeah, it's normal that it takes a long time for people to step forward, and we need to normalize that behavior, because that's a normal response to trauma, to try to convince yourself that nothing happened. It was all fine. That's a very normal response to trauma. That's how our brains work. And there is, so we need to normalize that and explain to people why that happens. And hopefully they will understand.
Thank you, Steinunn. Maria, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, if it's not anybody else who wants to talk.
Okay.
Is anybody? No. Okay. So I would like to say that I am really impressed with the campaign. It is very, all campaigns, they are very, very clever and very difficult to achieve what you want. I think they were all I liked very much the idea of connecting sexual violence with pornography. So openly. And I think this is really a taboo. It would be a taboo for the Greek standards. And I am very happy to see this, that you broke this taboo of talking and connecting pornography with violence. I think that it is, I realized that if there are some concepts like consent or pleasure or ask before or say what you want to do, all this what you have highlighted, it's something that you can really learn and be aware of. And we have recently in Greece a campaign by the International Amnesty International, because we had a debate in Greece about a new law penalization of rape. And the campaign of the Amnesty International was without consent, it is a rape. There is a rape if there is no consent. And I think that it was really also very strong because it was a concept that was highlighted as very important, as crucial for violence. And I could imagine that also some kind of your campaigns could be also helpful in the Greek context, because I think that as you talk about a concept, a new concept, consent, it was a new concept in Greece. It was not in the penal law till now. It was recently added, and it had to be really advertised. And so my very technical question is who is paying for this campaign? How you fund this campaign?
Mhm.
Is it your center? Is it something national, something whatever? And if this can be disseminated to more people, of course, 20,000 is a huge number, and congratulations for that, for the 20,000 tests that you got. But I just want to know more about the context, materialistic context of this campaign, because it's very, very important. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, regarding the funding, it's always an obstacle to doing this kind of work, is just to fund it and try to convince people that this is important and that it should be funded. Basically, what we have done, we started out with almost nothing. We got a few small grants that were able to cover some of the cost of the production. And when I speak about production, I'm talking about, you know, producing the videos, the posters, the graphic design for the social media posts, creating, you know, some small things to distribute, like tattoos or lollipops or stuff like that. But we do what we did a few years ago in Steer Mode was that we implemented a new system with funding the organization, which is monthly donations from the public. So we have been doing face-to-face campaigns on the streets, and which have been very successful. We have now 6,500 people that support us every month with an average donation of $15 US per person. So you can just add up how much that is per year. So we were able to use a part of that money to sort of launch this campaign. And since then, we have been very lucky with funding. It's all national. It mostly comes from state funded, either either some grants or just direct funding from the Ministry of Education or from the Prime Ministry. But it never covers everything. It covers the cost of production, and then maybe a part of the salary of the project manager. The rest, having a full-time project manager doing this, is basically paid by us with the monthly donations from the public. So it was a decision on our behalf just to do this properly, whether or not it would get fully funded. And then regarding we are very happy to share all of these materials with others. So if anyone out there wants to replicate any of the campaigns, you are very welcome to do that. Of course, you would have to, do it all over with teenagers from your context. So you'd have to take new pictures and create new videos and stuff. But you're very happy just to use the concept if you want to, or if you want to use it as an inspiration or whatever. And I just want to, because you were talking about consent, we have it too. There's a fairly new legislation in Iceland. The rape legislation is now based on consent. It happened in 2019, I think, in Iceland. And yes, we had already been speaking about that, yeah, if there is no consent, then it's a rape. But we really needed a deeper discussion around what is consent. So if you use control or humiliation or nagging or stuff to get someone to say yes, is that a consent? So that was the question that we needed to put out there for the teenagers. And so basically, that's what we're talking about. We have all kinds of different videos and stuff. So basically, that consent needs to be fully given with, it needs to be an enthusiastic consent, which is not being controlled or coerced in any way. And I see that, do you think that consent can be given if the person in question has consumed alcohol beforehand? Do you think the answer varies? Yes, I do. I mean, I think that alcohol definitely limits your capacity to give consent. But of course, the circumstances vary. There are a lot of people that have had sex under the influence of alcohol and been able to consent to it. But obviously, if the other person has very lacking, consciousness, is either asleep or very, very lacking in consciousness, then that person is unable to consent. Absolutely. But yeah, it depends a little bit, which is always very, very complicated. But we try to say that, use your judgment and stay away rather than, going over some boundaries if you're unsure. Yeah.
Thank you, Steinunn. We have maybe time for one more question if there's anyone out there waiting. Okay. So thank you so much for such an.
Yeah, I want to react to one thing that being said in the comments, that sexual violence prevention should be in schools as a course. And I fully agree with that, absolutely. And that is really what we are advocating for here in Iceland very vigorously, that we really want sexual violence prevention being coupled together with gender education, because it needs to be put in a gendered perspective. And we really want that to be a part of the school curricula from when they are young, from kindergarten and upwards, so they can start to learn about boundaries when they're young, and then it can be applied to boundaries in sex and relationships when they are a little bit older. And so what we are doing with our campaign is basically just to make sure to keep this discussion alive and giving out examples about how this can be done without, because there are just so many people afraid of the subject, so many teachers afraid of the subject. So we are trying to frame it as something positive, interesting, and very important. And yeah, but definitely it should be a school course, because it needs to reach every child. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
My closing.
Thank you. Great last words. So yes, thanks Steinunn for your talk. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Steinunn.
Thank you, Eileen, for discovering Steinunn.
Happy to bring her to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck in your